The House will come to order. The chair recognizes the member from Auburn, Representative Osborne, who moves that the House adjourn from the session of May 26, 2022. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the House is adjourned. The House will attend to a prayer by House Chaplain Reverend Bob Stewart, pastor of St. Paul's United Methodist Church in Manchester.
Good afternoon. Let us be in a spirit of prayer. O loving and gracious God, we know that life is a gift from you, O Creator God. We are grateful and thankful that we were blessed to be in service with Representative Mary Griffin, who you have called home in June at the age of 96. Mary has served you in this great state of New Hampshire for many years. Mary served her constituents with honesty and integrity, as she was the oldest active serving state legislator in the country at the time of her death. God, we ask that you be with those that mourn Mary's passing, as she will be sorely missed by many in this chamber. Be with her family and friends, and I pray that you walk with them in their grief. Let us pause for a moment of silence as we remember Mary this day. Thank you, Mary, for the countless hours of your service. O compassionate God, we ask that you also be with our colleague, Gary Hopper. We are praying for Gary in this time of physical trial and ask that you surround those closest to him with your love and compassion. We gather today together to tend to the business of our state and ask that you be with each member represented here today. Give each member the wisdom to make sound decisions that will benefit the people they represent. Let us, as the body of the New Hampshire House of Representatives, regardless of our party affiliation, treat each other with respect and dignity, and that we work towards the common good of all the people of our state. O God of love, be with all the leaders of this House as they work diligently to conduct the business before us this day. I ask that you keep your hand upon each member and keep them faithful, fruitful, and steady as they complete the work set before them. We praise and glorify your holy name, Most High God, as we work together today in peace and harmony with each other. Amen.
The chair recognizes the Dean of the House, Senator Laura Panalakis, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair recognizes Michael T. Brown of New London, who will now sing our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight. All the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
House will attend to leaves of...
Mr. Speaker, the day, illness, Representatives Buras, Ellis, Hopper, Kittredge, Janice Schmidt. The day, important business, Representatives Iyer, Bartlett, Amanda Bolden, Bucco, Comtois, Cody, Creighton, Gorg, Infantine, Kaczynski, Kelsey, Mayville, Macbeth, O'Hara, O'Hearn, Plett, Suzanne Smith, Mark Warden, Weber, Weston, Yakubovich. The day, illness in the family, Representative Bob Elliott. The day, death in the family, Representative Snow.
These leaves shall be granted unless otherwise ordered by the House. House will attend to the introduction of guests.
Mr. Speaker, please welcome Sophia Biondolillo, guest of Representative Nutting Wong. Bill Palmer, guest of Representative Oxenham. Scott Lawrence, guest of Representative Petrigno. Pam Dancy and Dan Koulis, wife and guest of Representative Mills. Gabrielle Watson, guest of Representative Knirk. Bobby Bodeman, guest of Representative Marsh. Susan Amon, wife of Representative Amon. Heather Pearl, wife of Representative Pearl. Susan Elberger, William Darby, Linda Ryan, Carrie Spire, Danny Mills, Shelley Devine, and Alicia Gregg, guests of Representatives Cohen, Vale, and Tolersky. Sherry Gold and Stephanie Payer, guests of Representative Pimentel and Kaplan. Christine Ordinitz, guest of Representative Craig. Jesse Baldwin and Dave and Jennifer Zemansky, guests of the House Clerk. They are with us in the gallery today.
Welcome to the New Hampshire House. Remind everybody to turn your voting machines on. The House will now attend to a memorial resolution.
Mr. Speaker, House Resolution 24, memorializing Mary E. Griffin of Windham. Whereas we have learned with profound sorrow of the passing of our colleague and friend, Mary E. Griffin, who was serving her 13th term as the state representative, representing the town of Windham. And whereas a dedicated public servant, Mary Griffin served 3 terms on the Committee on Municipal and County Government and 10 terms on the Committee on Ways and Means, served 10 terms as Vice Chair of the Rockingham County Delegation, and served on dozens of committees and commissions. And whereas Mary Griffin was known for her grace, style, and poise, dancing her way into winning the Ms. Senior New Hampshire competition in 1993, and leading this body in the national anthem on a myriad of occasions. And whereas Mary Griffin was extremely active in her community, chairing numerous boards, serving countless causes, and taping her weekly television show, which featured more political guests than some well-known New Hampshire networks, a dedication that continued right up until her illness left her in care. And whereas, above all, Mary Griffin was the personification of a gentle lady who worked well with all her legislative colleagues, speaking ill of none and reciprocally receiving none either. Now be it therefore resolved by the House of Representatives in regular session convened, Mary E. Griffin be granted our highest praise and accolades, and offered our profound thanks for her service to her home community and the state of New Hampshire, offered by the House of Representatives.
Please rise and join me in a moment of silence in honor and memory of Representative from Windham, Honorable Mary Griffin. House will attend to communications.
Mr. Speaker, communication dated May 27th, 2022 via email. Dear Mr. Speaker, with the conclusion of our final session day before the summer break, I wish to take this time to inform you that I am resigning from the New Hampshire House, effective immediately. It has been an honor and privilege to represent the citizens of Hudson and Pelham these past 4 years. Running and serving as a state rep is one of the best decisions I've ever made. I'll treasure the opportunity to serve and the many dear friendships with legislators, staff, and lobbyists I've gained along the way. My wife Kathy and I decided about 15 years ago to someday retire in Florida full-time. We are relocating to the Villages, to our home we recently purchased, and will no longer be residing in New Hampshire. Kathy has waited patiently these past 2 years to allow me to serve a second term. I hope to remain politically active in Florida via various organizations, assisting with campaigns, or perhaps running for office once again locally. The decision to resign and move out of state is surely bittersweet, for as much as I look forward to the next chapter in my life, I'll look back fondly on these last 4 years serving in Concord and living in the great state of New Hampshire the past 17. Thank you for your support and understanding. Sincerely, Bob Green. Via email on June 7, 2022. Dear Clerk Smith, it is with great sadness and regret that I am sending you this letter of resignation effective June 1st. I am also advising the House Democratic Office and our leader, Cody. It has been a tremendous honor and privilege and humbling experience to serve nearly 6 years in this historic and venerable body, representing Nashua and the Granite State as a whole. I have met and worked with so many wonderful people, true public servants. Working in Concord, surrounded by history and tradition, has been an experience I will never forget. As you are aware, I've had serious health issues and now find that the disease is progressing much faster than expected, making it nearly impossible for me to participate in any meaningful way in the House activities. Secondly, even if my health had allowed attendance, I will be moving to Keene with my daughter in the first week of June, thereby moving out of the city of Nashua and Hillsborough County. I am sorry to leave so much work unfinished, especially when we have so many opportunity to improve lives and benefit our people. And I recognize what excellent work the House has done so far, and I feel that I have left the House down lately and not carrying my weight due to illness. I am impressed by all the great contributions made by our hardworking colleagues. I'm so sorry I can no longer be a part of it. I have enjoyed the camaraderie. Best wishes for the remainder of the session. Sincerely, Skip Cleaver. Via email on July 18, 2022. Mr. Speaker, according to the law of the land, the New Hampshire State Constitution, Part 2nd, Article 14th, as of Monday, July 18th at 12 p.m., I will cease to be qualified to represent the inhabitants of District 8 of Belknap County. It has been an honor to serve the people of my district in the state of New Hampshire as a state representative. Sincerely, Raymond J. Howard. Via email on August 8, 2022. Mr. Clerk, it is with great sadness that I inform you and the entire House of my departure from my role as representative for Hillsborough District 22, as I am leaving the district to pursue my education. I have enjoyed my time in the House, making many friends along the way. I wish the best for every member of the House and for the institution itself. My resignation shall be effective immediately. Goodbye and good luck, Tony LaBranch. August 11, 2022, via email. Mr. Clerk, please accept this message as my resignation from the House, effective immediately. Andrew Bolden. Via letter to the Speaker, August 30th, 2022. Mr. Speaker, in the recent past, we had a conversation about life changes and decisions in my household. As my partner continues through the process of selling his business here, we purchased a home and will be relocating to Tennessee. While the decision was difficult, we feel it is best for us at this time. Over the next several weeks, I will be away, handling the move and working on that property to secure our full arrival. For this reason, I think it only fair that because I cannot be present to perform my duties, it would be proper for me to turn in my resignation. My time in the legislature and our Republican caucus with our very talented leaders has been one of the most rewarding times of my life. I've had the opportunity to serve with and learn from the best, and hopefully my contributions were thought of as positive for our great state. I thank you for your trust in the rest of leadership, in particular our Majority Leader Jason Osborne. I thank you for his wisdom and guidance, and to my fellow legislators, I appreciated learning from each and every one of you. Keep up the good work. I wish the best for all of you and continue to hope for the continuance of legislating from a liberty and freedom perspective, because it is in this where each individual citizen will gain the most. We are here to work for the people and should always think of how each piece of legislation that is presented for debate and discussion will affect them. In Liberty, Herschel Nunez. Via email, September 1st, 2022, Dear Mr. Speaker and esteemed colleagues, I hereby resign from the House effective September 11, 2022, due to the fact that I am moving out of state. It has been a pleasure and an honor to serve the town of Exeter in the New Hampshire House. My parting wish for the Chamber is that those who labor within it may in future find new ways to remember what we all have in common and spend less time concentrating on what divides us. Best regards, Lisa Bunker.
House will attend to a motion to suspend the House rules.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Osborne and Wallner move that all necessary House rules be so far suspended as to allow introduction and consideration at the present time of House Bill 2023 FNA, making appropriations to the Department of Energy for a state emergency fuel assistance program and a supplemental electric benefit, and relative to the Electric Low-Income Program Fund, without the required referral to committee, public hearing, and report from committee, and if passed, allow for immediate third reading, a copy of which is in your seat pockets.
Chair recognizes Representative Prout to speak against the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I oppose the motion to suspend the rules. The process of having hearings on bills is important. Listening to public feedback on proposed language, allowing time for many eyes to read bills and point out flaws in the language is important. One such flaw that is obvious in this bill is that it has no phasing out provision. If a household makes $1 too much, you get nothing. This perverse incentive for some to make a little less money, turn down those extra hours to stay under the limit, is enough to make me vote against this bill. But also, by bringing this bill to us via suspension of the rules, we have no opportunity to draft floor amendments. They would have had to have been turned into the clerk by 4 p.m. yesterday on a bill that isn't formally introduced unless we pass the motion before us. Even if I wanted to propose a compromise to make this terrible wealth redistribution program that will take funds that came from all the taxpayers of New Hampshire and give it to approximately 3% of households slightly less abhorrent, there's no practical way for me to do so. This is a bad way of doing business. This is why our rules normally do not allow for us to do this, and why we should all vote against suspending them today. I ask you to press the red button and join me in saying no to this motion to suspend the rules. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Abramson to speak against the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to the motion to suspend the rules on this measure for the simple reason that I contacted my constituents in Seabrook and Hampton Falls and asked their opinion on this, and they thought that this was a terrible idea, that it was described as a drop in the bucket or would have no impact whatsoever, but I think that it would have a small impact. The perhaps 5 or 6% of people in the state who would actually qualify and actually receive some benefit from the money, there's no question that they would receive a small amount of savings. But the other 95% of people hate it when they see their tax money taken from them and given to benefit someone else. And that has always been the case, and no one could possibly serve in this House and not know about the issue that taxpayers hate paying more in taxes and then seeing someone else get the money and then being disqualified from getting the benefit on themselves. But there's a bigger economic issue. I have a background in economics, and one of the first things I learned in my high school economics class was that any time you subsidize something, any taxpayer subsidies merely drive up the cost. This will not increase the amount of energy or the amount of goods and services that we're able to consume. It will only increase the subsidies to the energy sector. This has been viewed by some and described by some in our state as corporate welfare, although it's in an indirect form. The ultimate benefit, I think, will not go to the general public, that the general public will see the loss in an opportunity.
Representative, this is about the suspension of the rules, not the bill itself.
All right. I apologize for that. But the bill has not been through a public hearing, and all of these concerns that the public has raised, they have not had the opportunity yet to express these at a public hearing or through the emails and phone calls that we receive as members of this House. And yet when we do have the chance to go to our constituents, they haven't had the chance to read this bill, but they've heard about some of the details, and they hate it. It is just another taxpayer subsidy. Low taxes are the result of low spending, and low spending can only happen if we show the regular discipline to vote no on these big spending items. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Stephen Smith to speak for the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let's dial this back to what you're actually about to vote on. You are about to vote on whether or not we will consider the bill, not the bill. Whether we can talk about it, whether it exists even. That's what we're voting on today. Why are we doing it this way? Because some would say that the situation is an emergency. It's about to affect Granite Staters now, next month certainly, and cannot wait for us to get around to it next January through March, or whenever the bill would actually be considered. Granite Staters need us to discuss this today because winter is coming. Please support the motion.
The motion before us is suspension of the rules. A division has been called. This will be a division vote. Members, take your seats. Make sure you turn on your voting machines. Turn on your voting machines. Representative Baldasaro was asked for a roll call. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is not sufficiently seconded. This will be a division vote. Chair recognizes Representative Burt for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know we are not Robin Hood, if I know the little amount to be passed out will not make the person receiving it, because it won't be enough, the person not receiving it.
Representative,
Yes.
this is about the suspension of the rules, not the bill itself.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was thinking the same thing myself. So I will change my speech then. Darn. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, if I know taxation is theft, would I now press the red button? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
House will be in order. Chair recognizes Representative Smith for a parliamentary inquiry. Stephen Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I think that it is the wrong message to tell our constituents we didn't even want to talk about this today, while they see the effect things are having on them, then would I press the green button so we can at least tell them we talked about it?
The question is on suspension of the rules. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. See if I remember how to do this. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? House will attend to the state of the vote. 259 voting yea, 166 voting nay. The motion passes by the 2/3. Recognize the clerk for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, Representatives Osborne and Wallner offer the following: resolved that the suspension of the rules adopted by 2/3 of the House in accordance with the list in the possession of the clerk, House Bill 2023 F&A, making appropriations to the Department of Energy for a state emergency fuel assistance program and a supplemental electric benefit, and relative to the electric low-income program fund, shall be by this resolution read a first and second time.
This is the introduction motion. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Representative Smith moves the bill ought to pass. Chair recognizes Representative Stephen Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So you may have seen advertisements about an energy relief plan that does not exist, the governor's $100 million relief program. That is not before you today. That would have sent a very small amount of money to almost everybody. Personally, I'm not speaking for everyone else, that seems like a meaningless political gesture to me. Instead, I wanted to do something that was actually effective, as did many others. So if you base this on the numbers, right now, the LIHEAP program helps people with energy and electric and fuel assistance. That's the Low-Income Heat Energy Assistance Program, and it helps people up to 60% of the median income in New Hampshire. But we have inflation, and we have rising costs. So it seems reasonable that if you are, say, 15% above that bracket that they have right now, you may be feeling like the people in that bracket felt a couple of years ago. So it seems right to try to do at least a slight correction and give those people some assistance. So what this bill does is gives them $200 for their electric bill, $450 for their fuel oil, which is a decent amount of fuel oil. It's not going to fix the problem, but it's their money. It's sitting in the bank. We might as well give it back to them. It does them more good than it does us. There were arguments about, well, when you do these handouts, people will just spend it. That's actually not a possibility with this bill. The payments will go directly to the utility companies, to the electric company, to the oil company. So nobody's getting a check. That's not how it works. It's a small amount of relief, but it's what we can do. And like I said, the money's in the bank. I'm never against giving the people their money back. I hope you can support this measure today.
I forgot to mention on the last motion, Representative Foster declared a conflict of interest and did not participate. Chair recognizes Representative McGee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, esteemed colleagues. I rise today in support of the bill appropriating state emergency fuel assistance, a supplemental electric benefit for moderate income earners, and additional funding for existing low-income electric assistance program, the EAP. In the governor's original press conference responding to the Public Utility Commission's approval of an electric price hike from 11 cents a kilowatt to 22 cents a kilowatt, he announced a plan to credit $100 to every electric bill payer in New Hampshire, regardless of need. But the impact for bill payers, according to Eversource, would be an average of about $70 per month for 6 months. So although the chicken in every pot solution was an easy one, it was not adequate. Then the Speaker and others raised the concerns about giving help to those who really didn't need it, and they suggested that we also look at developing a state-funded heating assistance program. So in addition to the federally funded low-income fuel assistance program, target those median income earners for whom utility rate increases could mean the difference between heating and eating. This effort, the Temporary State Emergency Fuel Assistance Program, was designed to help the people above the low income assistance threshold of 60% of median income, as my colleague, Representative Smith, just mentioned. So where we landed with the bill is that people who earn between 60 and 75% of median income can now apply for up to $200 or for $200 in electric assistance. If they qualify, they get the whole amount. There's no variable. And up to $450 in fuel assistance, which also includes people who have electric heat. So it's not just oil and gas. It's if you're heating with electric, you would also be eligible. So that ends up being $650 total in emergency utility bill assistance for those middle income earners for both programs. Now, we have a concern that the number of low income electric assistance households is bigger than the funding provided in this bill. But there is an additional $7 million that was added to bolster that fund, which, you know, we are hoping is going to go a long way to helping those people in the low income category to meet their bills this winter. So although very little help was sought from my caucus, and we would have welcomed the chance for further collaboration on this, we are happy to say that we helped secure the increase in the state emergency electric assistance payout from $100 up to $200 per household, because that was the original problem that we were trying to resolve, was the increase in electric bills. So we certainly would have preferred for that to be closer to the $420 the average person will pay in higher electric bills. Over the 6 months this rate increase will be in effect. And we can work to implement energy policies that would promote greater independence and market competition so that we have better hedges against this kind of a price spike in the future. But while there's more that we could do, there's always more that we can do. And so that is why I'm asking for your support in passing this much needed relief for Granite Staters. Thanks.
Chair recognizes Representative Marjorie Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I imagine many of you in this room has just felt the earth shake. And the reason that the earth has shaken is because my esteemed colleague from Charlestown and I, who share a last name, do not always share positions. But today we do. And we do recognizing for each of us that we believe that we would rather light a candle than curse the darkness. I don't think either of us is thrilled with this bill. I cannot speak, and I wouldn't dare to speak for my colleague from Charleston, but I can speak for myself. This is a Band-Aid. It is a short-term Band-Aid. It is not any more than that. But if you have scraped your knee, a Band-Aid helps. And many of our constituents are struggling with the fact that the utilities have dramatically increased the charges that will be felt by people at every level of income. And the governor's initial proposal thought the same relief for everybody, and that makes no sense. The reason we have government is because we believe together we can create a life that is better for all of us than if we each are on our own. And that means that we have to look at the people who need the most help. If I had my druthers, I would begin by changing the people who serve on the Public Utilities Commission. I don't have my druthers, and I recognize that. If I had my druthers, I would not be favoring a short-term, 6-month solution, but a long-term change in how we address the very real problems that we will be facing in this city, in this county, in this state, in this nation, on how we deliver and what we deliver to meet our energy needs. But today we have a short-term Band-Aid before us, an opportunity to do a little bit, an opportunity to recognize, I'm going to use a Chinese expression. I hope no one then says I'm a Chinese communist sympathizer, but some of you will get that joke. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And this is one step, and the next step and the step after that will be taken by the next legislature. But to not take the first step today would be to deny a modicum of relief to people who desperately need it. So I hope that you will join all the Smiths in the legislature who will support this legislation. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Umberger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess I have to change my name to Smith. So I will be Representative Smith for the next few moments if there's no objection. First of all, I want people to understand that in order to receive any of this money, the people will have to apply for it. So just because you earn within that 60 to 75% of the median income doesn't mean I'm going to send you money to your fuel oil company. You must apply for it. And so if you don't want to apply for it, fine. If you do want to apply for it, great. So that's number one. Number two, I have heard rumblings about how we are totally depleting our surplus. We're not. The final figures for FY22 will be available right after 30 September. Right now, we still have, with all this money taken out, we still have a surplus of a minimum of $120 million. So those of you that want that money to go to the rainy day fund will make that decision after September. But there is still surplus money. And in case you're not following what's going on in 23, July and August also had significant surpluses. So we are not depleting under any circumstances the dollars that we have available to do good things in New Hampshire. So I ask you to please support this because you are helping your friends and your neighbors. You are not helping me because my family income is greater than $100,000, just in case you wanted to know. If you didn't want to know, that's okay too. But so it's no financial benefit to me, so I can vote my conscience. But I do ask that you support this for everyone in your community and in your state, in this state, because I think it's important. We do not want anyone outside or inside freezing to death with 50 blankets on them, hoping that that's going to keep them warm this winter. Thank you.
The motion before us is HB 2023. The motion is ought to pass. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted.
PI?
We just voted.
Yeah, I know. I have a PI for you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Can I be recognized?
Yeah.
Based on the rules of the House and the rules of the other chamber, if the other chamber decides to do any shenanigans and stick amendments on this, are we going to require a second suspension of the rules to consider their amended version?
They've already, not today, they've already been informed that we're not going to accept it.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Osborne for third reading motion.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Osborne moves that HB 2023, making appropriations to the Department of Energy for a state emergency fuel assistance program and a supplemental electric benefit, and relative to the electric low-income program fund, be read by title only, and that the third reading motion be applied by this resolution, and that its title be the same as adopted, and that it be passed at the present time.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. The House will attend to the Governor's veto message on House Bill 52, apportioning congressional districts. The question before the House is, notwithstanding the Governor's veto, shall House Bill 52 become law? Chair recognizes the Chair recognizes Representative Bergeron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose the question that House Bill 52 shall become law despite the Governor's veto of the bill. House Bill 52 pertains to apportioning congressional district. The bill passed the House by a very small margin. In fact, the motion to table the bill failed by just one vote. And the bill was sent to the Governor's desk, even though he said if it reached his desk, he would veto it. And he did just that. The state's primary elections are behind us. Voters in the 1st Congressional District have chosen their candidates. Democrats have nominated Chris Pappas. Republicans have nominated Caroline Leavitt. If we override the Governor's veto, neither of those candidates will be residents of the district that they seek to represent, because neither of those candidates would be residents within the proposed boundaries of the 1st Congressional District under House Bill 52. The court's congressional map moved 5 towns and about 9,000 people from one district to the other. House Bill 52 would have moved more than 500,000 people from 29 cities and towns to another district. That's more than 36% of the state's population. Thus, many of the voters who supported Chris Pappas or Caroline Leavitt in the primary would not have an opportunity to vote for them in November. That's not fair to our voters or respectful of their wishes. With less than 9 weeks to go before the general election, now is not the time to alter the congressional districts by overriding the veto on House Bill 52. As such, please press the red no button to oppose the question before us. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Abramson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of HB 52, notwithstanding the governor's veto. The proposed map is not perfect. Nothing made by man is. Yet it's done about as well as any committee could. Benjamin Franklin said, after Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence was being rewritten, that he had made it a point never to draw up any important document that was later to be the subject of editing by some committee. It's been said that Franklin was not chosen to draw up the original draft of the Declaration because he might conceal a joke within it. But of all the plans drawn up by various groups and committees, this map is the best, or at least it is the least bad. Mr. Speaker, the famous salamander-shaped district in Massachusetts that gave rise to the term gerrymander has the top of that creature's head right on my property in Seabrook and Salisbury. For 170 years, to bring some of you back through some of the history of this, many voters supported Republicans, and Republicans campaigned on this for a very long time, precisely because we did not gerrymander districts, but produced maps that were fair or fairer, more independent, and more competitive. That is, they were as good as they could be. And we pointed out the dangers in those years of gerrymandering, which, as the other side had said earlier, Southern Democrats had used to lock up Southern legislatures until the 21st century. This proposed map is better because it leaves 2 competitive districts and 2 relatively compact districts. In facing the reality of the usual midterm backlash, which we must consider from the party that holds the White House, polling indicates that it's unlikely that members of the minority caucus will have as much impact next year. So I'm asking members of the minority to give serious consideration to this map this year.
The motion before us is the motion to override the governor's veto on HB 52. State Constitution requires a roll call. 2/3 vote is required to override a veto. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you're opposed, you wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. This is going to be a roll call. Members, take their seats. The motion before members take their seats. The motion before us is whether we override the governor's veto on HB 52. It requires the Constitution requires a roll call and 2/3. If you're in favor of having this bill become law, you will press the green button. If you are opposed and you wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? House will attend to the state of the vote. 103 voting yea, 220 voting nay. Governor's veto is sustained. House will attend to the governor's veto message on House Bill 275 relative to declaration of a state of emergency. Chair recognizes Representative Grody.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. RSA 4:45, without this bill, empowers the general court to terminate an emergency order or an executive order by a majority vote. This is a power that we already have, and that this bill does not increase or diminish the current power that we have. We're all adults. We are representatives of our constituents. We come to Concord when called by the Speaker, and there's no further action needed on this. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to talk to everyone who's taken an oath to our Constitution. And just as a basic reminder, our constitutional framework establishes that the power that is used on behalf of the people rests with the legislature. We pass the laws, and then after we pass them, the executive can agree or disagree. But the power of the people rests in the legislature. And what we've found ourselves in a situation is that the way HB 275 is resting based on this veto is that the governor, the executive branch, has too much power, an unconstitutional amount of power. I think we all can agree that there's a reasonable amount of time that the executive must act in an emergency. And we've said for the purposes of this bill that it's 84 days. The 90 days is the War Powers Act, which limits the president's authority to deploy military force for 90 days before the Congress must be informed and have an opportunity to act. And so why did Congress do that, and why should we override this veto? It's for the same reason. The power of the people rests in the legislature. When separation of powers was created at the founding, it was thought that each body within the government would jealously exercise its prerogatives. And so I would ask you today, not on behalf of us, but on behalf of future legislatures, to jealously guard our legislative prerogative and override this veto so that the legislature must permit the executive branch to continue extraordinary emergency powers beyond an initial 84 days. I think 84 days should be enough to deal with a lot of emergencies, and certainly if it's going to last beyond 84 days, the people need an opportunity to speak, and we speak on behalf of the people. So I'm going to ask for a roll call. I'm also going to ask that you vote green when the time comes. Thank you very much.
House will be in order. The motion before us is, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 275 become law. The state constitution requires a roll call. 2/3 vote is required to override a veto. Chair recognizes Representative Grody for a parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, It is our responsibility to represent our that it is our responsibility to represent our constituents.
Representative, wait a minute. This will be a roll call vote. Members must take their seats, so I thought I'd done that, sorry. Member may continue.
Thank you. I'm going to start over since I started incorrectly.
Member will suspend for a minute. I'm a little rusty at this, so forgive me. Senator Groda, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that as an elected official by my constituents, it is my responsibility and my represents my integrity that I represent them wholeheartedly, and it is my responsibility to come at the heed of the call of the Speaker when this body wishes to terminate an executive order under RSA :45, and we do not need this added legislation, would I not press the red button and sustain the governor's veto? Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator Tony Lakis for a parliamentary inquiry.
If I know that HB 275 would permit the governor to declare a state of emergency for up to 84 days without action by this legislature, and if I know that this body met sooner than that after the declaration of even the recent unprecedented emergency, and if I know that there is a tremendous difference between this legislature having the power to act and having the duty to act as required by our Constitution as representatives of the people, when it might be easier to shirk that duty and leave the hard decisions to the governor. And finally, if I know that a state of emergency is a truly extraordinary thing, that it is the suspension of this constitutionally mandated separation of powers, would I press the green button to pass House Bill 275 regardless of the governor's veto? Thank you.
The motion before us is notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 275 become law. State Constitution requires a roll call. The two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. If you're in favor of the bill becoming law, you will press the green button. If you oppose and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Ham. Thank you.
Well said, Mr. Speaker.
If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will attend this state of the vote. 157 voting yea, 167 voting nay. Governor's veto was sustained. The House will attend to the governor's veto message on House Bill 319, requiring students in the university and community college systems of New Hampshire to pass the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services Civics Naturalization Test. Chair recognizes Representative Moffett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the philosopher Victor Cousin stated that, quote, "If ignorance is bliss, there should be more happy people." Mr. Speaker, this legislature passed two wonderful civics bills last year, HB 319 and HB 320. HB 320, which is now law, called for our high school grads to pass the citizenship test. Had a wonderful signing ceremony, beautiful. Now, its sister measure, or brother measure, HB 319 that we're looking at here, asked for the same thing to happen for college students. Now, we first want to thank the governor for meeting directly with me and a co-sponsor and showing us the respect to convey his concerns. One of the concerns was, if the high school students have already passed it, why do the college students need to pass it? And quickly, there's several answers to that. Half the UNH students are from out of state. Many of the community college students are in their 30s, so there was a gap. And I'll also say I spent 12 years in the university system. I spent 20 years in the community college system, and I can tell you that this bill is important and is needed. Now, when the bill had a hearing, both the university system and the community college system were neutral. They did not take a position. But an accreditation agency official was deployed who darkly warned or shared some misinformation. She said, this could cost $750 a test. Not true. The test is free. It's part of the public domain. It could be done online. It could be done as many times as necessary for a student to pass the test. Then it was later stated and repeated on the other side of the wall that we'd be the first state in the country to have such a measure as this. Also untrue. There's around 20 states that have similar requirements for college graduates to simply pass a citizenship test. Indeed, after this body first passed 319 last year, it got a great deal of attention. It was in the newspapers, and there were some polls. One poll showed that 80% of the New Hampshire residents supported the notion of having college students pass this as a graduation requirement. But the most egregious message that the accreditation person, the hired gun, so to speak, had to do with her message, and this is important. It's all important, but this is particularly important to you and to us. I'm going to paraphrase what she said, but her message was, you can't tell us what to do. Now think about that. You can't tell us what to do. Talk about the need for a civics lesson. That mentality of you can't tell us what to do should concern every one of us. If you agree with that, then you can go ahead and press the red button. But the people and the people's elected representatives, which is you and us, if we think that this is important and if we want college graduates to show this competency, then yeah, we can do that. It's a bipartisan bill. One staunch supporter was a great friend of most all of us, the late Democratic representative from Manchester, who sat in seat 524. Empty today, of course. We lost her last December. But she spent a lifetime in education, and she understood the importance of civics fundamentals to good citizenship. She actually offered a PI to HB 320 last year when we passed that one. So overturning a veto is and should be a heavy lift. That's civics. But I encourage my colleagues to again, vote for HB 319 to send the right message to the people, that we hear their desire that a college degree means more than maybe it does now. Passing this would increase the value of a college diploma. It would increase public support for college education. So the great entrepreneur Jim Rohn said, ignorance is not bliss. Ignorance is poverty. Ignorance is devastation. Ignorance is tragedy. This bill would strike a mighty blow, a significant blow against ignorance, and I ask that you again vote for it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Abramson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of HB 319 in spite of the governor's veto, requiring that civics be taught for university students. The governor recognizes that we recently, on a near-party line vote, added the teaching of civics to our graduation requirements already. That much is true. In fact, over 100 years ago, that was one of the promises made by socialist and progressive activists who marched and paraded in the 19-teens and 20s to justify changing from private tuition-funded schools to tax-funded government schooling. Though some recent high school graduates couldn't find the Bill of Rights nor know its contents because that promise largely has not been kept, and I'm sorry to say that that is still true of some of my generation. I hate to admit it, but it is true. From colonial times to almost World War II, those old brick private schools were 6th grade levels ahead of today's government schools. The problem with the reasoning in Sununu's veto message is that it ignores the fact that over 43% of UNH's students come from out of state, and many more of our continuing education students are adults who never went to high school in New Hampshire. I attended both the University of New Hampshire and Great Bay Community College, and those are great schools, but I never went to high school in New Hampshire. Most of the students entering college couldn't find the words common law in our Constitution, nor understand why the framers saw the Second Amendment as being so important. A degree from a New Hampshire university will simply guarantee less if we are sending students out into the world who know nothing of their Fourth Amendment privacy rights, Fifth Amendment property rights, and Sixth Amendment due process rights. We live in a society now where many of our neighbors do not fully understand Tuesday's state primary or the importance of grand juries and limiting the emissions of indictments, nor the duties given to voters to remove those petty tyrants and control freaks from elective office who might violate our basic rights. Mr. Speaker, the New Hampshire GOP platform states, "We believe that individual liberty is guaranteed under the Constitution of the United States and New Hampshire, that the liberty of the people must be protected above the power of government, and that it is only through an adherence to our founding documents, which the people must understand and know, that we will continue to grow as a free constitutional republic." Green button.
The motion before us is notwithstanding the governor's veto on House Bill 319, shall it become law. Constitution requires a roll call. 2/3 vote is required to override a veto. Members, take your seats. This is a roll call vote. The motion before us, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 319 become law. This is a roll call vote. Chair recognizes Representative Myler for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I believe that 319 was a flawed bill from the beginning, and if I believe that this august body should not be mandating graduate requirements for our higher institutions of higher education, our colleges and community colleges, would I then vote red to sustain the veto and negate the proposal for the override? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Motion before us is notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 319 become law. State Constitution requires a roll call. A 2/3 vote is required to override a veto. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will attend to state of the vote. 143 voting yea, 181 voting nay. The governor's veto on House Bill 319 is sustained. House will attend to governor's veto on House Bill 1022, permitting pharmacists to dispense the drug ivermectin by means of a standing order and establishing a commission to study the use of ivermectin to treat COVID-19. Chair recognizes Representative Clerk. House will be in order. Member has a right to be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Permitting a pharmacist to dispense a medication by standing order requires a well-evaluated protocol established through a broad consensus of providers and pharmacists using the best available data. A broad consensus supporting the use of ivermectin in COVID does not exist. This is not to say that ivermectin is not a good drug. It is excellent for the treatment of parasitic worms, but efficacy in COVID is not proven. You will hear claims that over 100 studies have shown ivermectin to be helpful in reducing the severity and duration of COVID-19, but this is simply not true. There have been numerous studies regarding ivermectin and COVID-19 which sound compelling.
The member will suspend. The member has a right to be heard. If you need to have a conversation, please take it out in the anteroom. Member may continue.
Thank you. You will hear claims that over 100 studies have shown ivermectin to be helpful in reducing the severity and duration of infection of COVID-19, but that's simply not true. The numerous studies regarding ivermectin that sound compelling often have design flaws, serious flaws. A high-quality study of medication efficacy must be randomized, double-blinded, and placebo-controlled. And most of the studies in ivermectin published so far are limited by small sample sizes, no blinding, no randomization, the use of concomitant medications, or poorly defined study groups. When I last spoke at the well about this bill, even the well-designed studies had significant limitations, such that definitive conclusions regarding the clinical efficacy of ivermectin in the treatment of COVID-19 could not yet be reached. Since then, the Cochrane Collaboration, an internationally recognized independent group with decades of experience in analyzing medical literature, updated their review findings of ivermectin and COVID-19, stating that there is now high certainty evidence that ivermectin has no beneficial effect for outpatients with COVID, no evidence that ivermectin prevents COVID infection, and no certain evidence that it has any benefit for inpatients with COVID. Now, the final version passed by both chambers allowed ivermectin to be distributed and then have that authority sunset July 1, 2024, and it created a commission to review the data regarding the efficacy of ivermectin in treating COVID in order to make a recommendation as to whether the authorization for a standing order should be renewed. Well, that's totally backwards. It is inappropriate to legislatively pretend there is a consensus and then evaluate to see if one actually exists. If it is determined by quality studies that ivermectin has a place in treating COVID at some point in the disease process, it will gladly, commonly become prescribed. So the point is, the governor is correct in vetoing this bill. And his veto message states, quote, "The state currently has only 4 instances in which pharmacists can dispense medication without a prescription. Those medications are smoking cessation, contraception, substance use disorder, and treatment for sexual assault, all of which have gone through rigorous reviews and vetting to ensure that they meet all necessary protocols prior to a medication being dispensed by standing order. All drugs and medications should be subjected to that same rigorous process if they are to be dispensed by standing order." End quote. Ivermectin fails that process of rigorous review. And, as he pointed out, ivermectin can still be prescribed off-label by a provider if that is desired by the provider and the patient. So, in summary, standing orders with pharmacists should not be used to dispense medications for indications which are not clearly supported by the best available medical evidence. And ivermectin does not reach that level of evidence. The governor's veto should not be overridden. We should let high-quality research guide the practice of medicine. We should not legislate the practice of medicine. So please press red to vote no on the motion to override the veto. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does the member yield to questions?
In the interest of time, no.
Member does not yield. Chair recognizes Representative Abramson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of HB 1022, notwithstanding the governor's veto. The bill simply provides an option for licensed physicians or advanced practice registered nurse to provide a standing order for pharmacists to dispense ivermectin, which many studies have shown has been very effective in combating other viruses. But the New Hampshire GOP platform states, quote, "We believe that the liberty of parents to direct the upbringing of healthcare, education, and well-being of their children is a fundamental right. Decisions in regard to the upbringing, healthcare, education, and well-being of children should be the free choice of parents acting on their children's behalf, unimpeded by intrusive government regulation and control." Mr. Speaker, parents, not politicians, lawyers, activists, judges, and bureaucrats, must have the right to raise and educate their own children as they see fit and make important medical decisions with their family doctor. Our Declaration of Independence says also, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed." Whereas the Republican platform states, "We believe that the New Hampshire and United States constitutions were written by the forefathers to limit our government, not to limit our freedom. It must be a decision left between doctors and parents and patients, not left up to politicians and bureaucrats." Green button.
Does the member yield to questions? Member yields. Senator Baldasaro, you may inquire.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative, for taking my question. You know, I'm not a medical person or anything like that, a doctor, nothing like that. I'm an old Marine that breaks stuff. But anyways, I did a Google search while I'm sitting in the seat, and I look at everyone that's using ivermectin. It seems like this medication, do you know if this is being used, that the doctor in Congress is issuing it to congressional people, and rich people are getting hold of this medicine, but the poor people are being shut down on this medication?
I've been told that, but I haven't been given names of politicians and wealthy people. But I do know that the common people are being deprived of a lot of the leading medication. In fact, that was admitted by Senator Ted Kennedy of Massachusetts, that because of his connections, he was able to get access to much better medical care than the rest of us.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
The House will be in order. The motion before us is notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 1022 become law. The state constitution requires a roll call. 2/3 vote is required to override a veto. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. Members, take your seats. Motion before us, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 1022 become law. Chair recognizes Representative Clerk for parliamentary input.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that standing orders with pharmacists should not be used to dispense medications for indications which are not clearly supported by the best available medical evidence, and if I know that ivermectin does not reach this level of evidence, and if I know that if a person wants to take ivermectin or wishes to give it to their child, they have every right to have that discussion with their medical provider who can prescribe it off-label, as this bill only prevents a pharmacist from dispensing ivermectin by standing order. It does not preclude having a conversation with your doctor and getting a prescription if you so desire. And if I know that we should not legislate the practice of medicine, but rather we should let high-quality research guide the practice of medicine, would I then press red to vote no on the motion to override the veto of HB 1022? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Leon for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that contrary to the veto message, taking ivermectin does not limit future treatment options, and if I know that pharmacists are the professionals that are best trained to assess an individual's risk and their medication interactions, just as is commonly done in Europe, and lastly, if I know that if ivermectin is helpful, it is helpful early, and wasting valuable time waiting for an appointment with a doctor misses that window, would I then press the green button to override the governor's veto?
The motion before us is notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 1022 become law. State Constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you are opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Altshuler.
All members present had an opportunity to vote. Also attend this state of the vote. 144 voting yea, 170 voting nay. The governor's veto is sustained. House will attend to the governor's veto message on House Bill 1131 relative to facial covering policies for schools. Chair recognizes Senator Blazek. Chair recognizes Representative Weiler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to overturn the veto of 1131, the face mask bill. I had several requests to file this bill from mothers who were frustrated at trying to teach young children to properly wear masks. They were also asking why the students were still required to mask up after the mask requirement for the rest of us was repealed. We had hours of testimony in both the House and the Senate about the unreasonableness and the restrictions. Not just parents, but coaches. Picture a basketball game with the players running up and down the court with masks on. Bus drivers testified. We heard from a scientist who pointed out that the children were the least susceptible to the COVID virus and that no members of this group had had a serious attack, nor had any member died in this group. Speech pathologists testified that I had set back speech therapy for a year, as children need to see the mouth movements to properly speak. After all this, the governor vetoes the bill. Of all the hypocrisies, he says this should be a local decision. Did he not read the bill? Local in my mind, and I believe in your minds, is that the parents are the right decision makers, not the school board. The school board never claimed any scientific reason for their rulings or why children need masks when no one else was required to wear them. Even in the language in his veto message, to quote, the state must remain steadfast in protecting local control, as decisions like this are best left to authorities closest to parents and families, where they can work with their neighbors to decide what is right for their children. Yes, that's what we're saying in this bill. Parents should decide. Let's send a message that this sick legislation believes that when a local decision is needed, that we believe that local decision is made at the family level and not by an unelected superintendent. Please push the green button and overturn this veto. Vote green, vote green. Thank you.
The motion before us is notwithstanding the governor's veto shall HB 1131 become law. The state constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. The motion before us is notwithstanding the governor's veto shall HB 1131 become law. This is going to be a roll call vote. Chair recognizes Representative Luno for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know this is a flawed bill, wouldn't I just press the red button to sustain the veto? Thank you.
Chair, House will be in order. Chair recognizes Representative Blazek for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that HB 1131 is a parents' rights bill, and Mr. Speaker, if I know that there is no more local of a control than individual and parental control, and if, Mr. Speaker, if I know that no politician at any level should be able to force a child against the will of their parents to cover their breathing holes, then I would now press the green button to overturn the veto on HB 1131.
House will be in order. The motion before us, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 1131 become law. State constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you're opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? House will attend the state of the vote. 150 voting yea, 170 voting nay. The governor's veto is sustained. House will attend the governor's veto message on House Bill 1454 relative to permits for siting of new landfills. Chair recognizes Representative Tucker.
So I'm here to talk about and ask for an override of the governor's veto on HB 1454. There are many people in the balcony. There were people here on the plaza. We've had petitions. This is a bill that has enormous enthusiasm around the state. It's a bipartisan bill. It was from the outset. There were people in northern New Hampshire who were very concerned about the issue of landfills. Small groups of people gathered. Then those groups grew to larger groups. There was an effort between the House and the Senate. There were people who joined groups. We had warrant articles at town meetings supporting this idea, and we moved across town lines, then across county lines, and now it's become clear that this is a statewide issue. This last year, we have learned a lot more about contaminants and groundwater and PFAS and bacteria and all these things we don't really like to think about that can happen under our feet when we can't see it. We think everything is fine, and it's not fine. Now, at the last minute, we're hearing rumbles that there are claims that this bill will affect potential expansions of existing landfills. But that's just not true. There's a key sentence in this bill which I want to read to you. Nothing in this paragraph of this bill shall be construed to prohibit the expansion of any landfills that are in operation at the time this paragraph takes place. This is very important. This makes it so this bill is something that can be passed now to deal with an imminent problem and to protect our very precious waters all over the state. As the prime sponsor, let me assure you that it was always my intention, as well as the bipartisan sponsors in the House and Senate, to craft a bill that applied only to new landfills. We believe we succeeded, and that it is impossible to read that sentence any other way. We have concurrence on a phone conversation that was lengthy with Director Wimsatt, and I assure you that there is nothing here that could be a problem. At the moment, 3 Republican speakers are ready to speak to this bill, but no one signed up to oppose this override. So I leave it up to the 3 speakers, Representative Walter Stapleton, Representative Matt Syke.
No.
Oh, I can't do that? I'm sorry.
No, sorry, Representative, you can't do that.
Okay. Well, so you're the one who does it.
I will announce the speakers.
Thank you. And they can decide what they want to do about speaking. That's really up to them. Meanwhile, I urge you all to do the right thing, to do it now, to pass this bill that so many people have worked on collaboratively for so long. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Representative Stapleton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I arise to support the override of the governor's veto to make HB 1454 law. Water is life. The bill is reasonable and common sense protection of our water resources from potential leakage from landfills upon any breach or failure of linings. Many people will say linings never fail. Some says they're quite apt to fail. We can't take a chance. Locating landfills on permeable soils without sensible buffer distance to intervene upon failure is irresponsible. The bill's 5-year travel criteria enables detection and remediation to be well ahead of a contaminant leakage and migration to surface waters than did the arbitrary 200 feet existing law, which just might not be enough buffer to preclude polluting our surface waters. The time and travel protocol is a science-based answer to uncertainty, has been utilized in other states to assure sufficient setback relative to various soil and strata conditions. This technology approach has been increasing in use since 2003, and our neighbor state of Maine has used it successfully for 15 years, even with a 6-year multiplier. The veto note mandates that the Department of Environmental Services contract with an engineer or hydrologist pursuant the SB 396 reference in it when evaluating a landfill permit. Well, that's fine, but it sorely lacks two things: the qualification of the engineer or hydrologist and the specific process that should be involved. It is therefore inadequate for the purpose of really protecting the waters. HB 1454 fills that gap, provides scientific process for protection, and we should enact it into law. So I ask you to please press the green button to enable this bill to enter into law and protect our precious water resources. Water is life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague did a wonderful job explaining the content of the bill, so I won't take much of your time this morning, other than to say when this bill last came to this chamber, it passed on a unanimous voice vote. And it seems like there are some rumblings and some changing of opinion. And in fact, it might seem strange that I would be up here arguing for this bill, this override of this veto in the first place, because on my side of the aisle, we value very highly free markets and low regulation and allowing businesses to do what businesses do. And we believe that because we believe that if we let people do what they do best, then all ships rise. And the standard of living of all people will rise as we allow people to do what they do best. But of course, I would almost never go against those principles, but all things have exceptions. And I believe that this bill presents an exception to that rule. And I'd just like to remind my friends in this chamber that earlier this year, I suspended my convictions of those rules as well to help the people of Merrimack because their waterways were compromised. And we stepped in and we required of business to remediate problems due to their waterways, because without water, you don't have anything. And it doesn't matter how highly we elevate the standard of living of people. If they don't have clean water to work with, then they don't have anything. So coming from the North Country, we're not opposed to more landfills. You know, a few of my colleagues have said, well, yeah, you don't mind siting landfills unless it's in your backyard. I have one in my backyard. I've had one in my backyard for 20 years. I know what it's like to have a landfill in your backyard. We're not opposed to having landfills in the North Country. We have 2 operating at the moment. All we want is for those landfills to be situated reasonably away from our water sources. Our environment is the basis of our economy up there. If we ruin our waterways, people don't come hunt, they don't come fish, they don't come do water sports. If our fish are compromised, if our animals are compromised, it does great damage to our economy in the North Country. And so we're just asking for common sense legislation. We don't mind siting another landfill, we just want it adequately separated from our waterways so that our waterways can remain safe. I hope that you will see this the way that I do. That you will vote green to overturn the governor's veto on HB 1454. Help us protect our waterways for the future. Thank you so much.
Chair recognizes Representative Gay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is my last day. This bill is one more step toward aligning our New Hampshire DES RSAs with good engineering practices for safe landfills. My son-in-law builds them. House Bill 1454 does not apply to existing landfills. It only applies to landfills yet to be built, and there's no pressing need to build more of them right now. This bill allows expanding the ones that we already have. The Mount Carberry landfill just received approval to expand through 2041. The Nashua Four Hills landfill is currently seeking a 30-year expansion through to 2052. And when we do need more trash capacity, the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services has shown that 86% of land in New Hampshire is hydrogeologically suitable for siting a new landfill. Currently requiring only 200 feet between a landfill and a water body reveals a lack of concern about hydrology and soil infiltration. We've come a long way from the superficial claims that clay liners last forever and landfill leaching poses no dangers to our lakes and rivers and coastal waters. We cannot risk having more leaks such as occurred at the Bethlehem landfill in May last year, endangering the Ammonoosuc River. New Hampshire already has its share of Superfund sites. Based on hydraulic conductivity tests, this bill requires that any landfill proposal near a perennial river, lake, or coastal water will need to be far enough away that it would take 5 years for leachate to reach the water. The 5-year travel distance can be reduced as low as 2 years if the landfill construction company incorporates adequate additional engineering to further control the leaching. We have a chance to protect New Hampshire lakes in a big way from multi-million-dollar businesses, namely landfill owners and trash haulers. The New England state that keeps authorizing more landfills is likely to end up with the biggest landfills filled with millions of tons of trash from out of state. Maine already refuses untreated trash to be brought into their state. As more comes to light about the chemical pollution in trash, more adjoining states will still want to deliver their trash to any other state that will accept it. This bill got its start after townspeople from multiple communities had been trying for years to protect their lake. But they were little guys trying to hold the line against a huge company with enormous resources. New Hampshire citizens should never have to endure such a battle again. Prevention is way cheaper than cleaning up contamination. House Bill 1454 will be a milestone in the ongoing race to protect our priceless New Hampshire waters. Please press the green button to vote once more to preserve our precious rivers, lakes, and coastal waters. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
House will be in order. The motion before us is notwithstanding the governor's veto shall HB 1454 become law. State constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. This will be a roll call vote. Members take their seats. The motion before us is notwithstanding the governor's veto shall HB 1454 become law. State Constitution, House will be in order. State Constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you are opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. If all members present had an opportunity to vote, House will attend to the state of the vote. The House will be in order. The gallery will contain itself. The vote is 256 yea, 65 nay. The veto is overridden. I will clean the gallery if you continue having outbursts. The House will be in order. Recognize the clerk for a message from the Senate.
Mr. Speaker, the Senate concurs with the House in the passage of the following entitled bill and resolution sent up from the House. House Bill 2023, making appropriations to the Department of Energy for a state emergency fuel assistance program and a supplemental electric benefit and relative to electric low-income program fund.
The House will attend to the governor's veto message on House Bill 1625, repealing prohibition on entering or remaining on a public way or sidewalk adjacent to a reproductive health care facility. Chair recognizes Representative Abramson.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of House Bill 1625, notwithstanding the governor's veto, repealing the buffer zone restrictions. This bill is supported by New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, which normally tends to lean pro-choice, but they still do support the repeal of this restriction in law. The U.S. Supreme Court has already rejected the exact same language of this law in throwing out the Massachusetts law. The High Court recognized both a free speech zone and the impracticality of blocking free press and competition within less than 25 feet of a competitor, by a competitor or pamphleteer. It is argued by Governors Hassan and Sununu in their veto messages that this law isn't, never has been, and never would be enforced. Then why leave it on the books? Is it not our job as lawmakers to remove victimless crimes, duplicative laws, unconstitutional and vague statutes, and laws that are never to be enforced? Is that not our primary duty? Mr. Speaker, God warns us in the Bible that man is not capable of making laws for his fellow man. Only God can do this because only God can foresee every possibility and every violation of the rights of man. Only God can understand every exception that could ever exist and every exceptional case that ever will exist. Since Pontius Pilate had Christ executed, man has continued to mechanically apply the law, repeating. I ask for order in the chamber.
Be careful. Member will continue.
Since Pontius Pilate had Christ executed, man has continued to mechanically apply the law, repeating the infamous excuse in other cases that we were just following orders. Men, women, and children have been enslaved, dismembered, hanged, flayed, boiled, and burned alive because laws were enforced that were supposed to have been forgotten. If it's not our job to repeal unenforced or unconstitutional laws, then why are we here? Do we have any other purpose than to update the law itself? Why have separation of powers, a system of checks and balances, if we will never act to limit the arbitrary power of the other two branches of government? Our absolute constitutional mandate. Mr. Speaker, God was right. Man cannot predict the exceptional cases nor second-guess the changing logics of court precedents. We cannot foresee nor predict what will happen in 1,000 of cases, and this is why we recognize the right of juries to nullify bad laws and badly interpreted laws. Yet in a greater sense, it has been a dereliction of duty for this body to continue to leave this and many other RSAs in place after the courts have thrown that language out for vagueness, for contradiction, for jurisdiction or jurisprudence, for reasons of clarity, for sanity, or for constitutionality. We took an oath or affirmation when we offered to hold this office, to uphold and defend that Constitution. And whether we like it or not, the next generation judges us by how often we keep our agreements, stand by our word, and stand by those words. If that Constitution is in the way of anyone's agenda, propose a constitutional amendment, as I have, but don't shrug off our duty. Stand firm and serve as a role model for the next generation. The New Hampshire GOP platform states, quote, encourage individuals and organizations who provide alternatives to abortion by meeting the needs of mothers through adoption, support, counseling, and educational services, unquote. Hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Green button.
Chair recognizes Representative Marjorie Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And once again, the earth will shake. Moderately, not the way it did earlier, but I am here to support the governor's veto. That's why the earth is shaking. And since the governor vetoed this bill, 16 states have denied women and their families and their doctors the right for the women to control their own bodies. What has happened as a result of that is that in many other states, the people who have been opposed to reproductive rights are now looking around for something to do, and they're coming to New Hampshire, so that increasingly those people who provide health care to women and in some cases to men have found an increase in the number of people who have stood in front of their facilities. I know there are lots of opinions. I tend to like to stick with just the facts, not suppositions, not what other people might say, not what a political party might say, but the facts are that the language in the buffer zone bill, that law that exists, has indefinitely not been overturned by any judicial body, and it is an appropriate language to help make it possible to protect public safety. And I ask you on that basis alone to support the governor's veto. Thank you very much.
Chair recognizes Representative Walper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to the governor's veto. I do so not because, as the esteemed representative from Durham said, that our buffer zone law has been found unconstitutional. I do so because it likely will. It likely will simply because it violates a pretty hard and fast Supreme Court precedent about curtailment of speech based on viewpoint discrimination. And since our law is explicitly viewpoint discrimination, I don't believe it will be upheld. So that's one reason why I oppose it. The bigger reason, just as well, is because it intends to restrict that freedom of expression that we find so important in our country. That's its intent. And as such, I couldn't cotton it either way. But in addition to that, the law is totally unnecessary. It was unnecessary the day it was drafted. It was unnecessary the day it was passed. It's been unnecessary for the whole time it's been on the books. And as near as I can tell, it will continue to be totally unnecessary. There has never been a case where this buffer zone would have stopped any infringement of the law. Never in the history of the state of New Hampshire has there ever been a single case. Year after year, as we have discussed this bill, from the day it came in until today, has there even been complaints to the police? It does not happen because the people that are out there who are advocating for the saving of babies' lives do so out of a spirit of love, not of hate. So, Mr. Speaker, the law is unnecessary. It's likely unconstitutional. I urge you to press the green button.
The motion before us is notwithstanding the governor's veto shall HB 1625 become law. State Constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. This is going to be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. The motion before us, notwithstanding the governor's veto, shall HB 1625 become law. House will be in order. State Constitution requires a roll call. A two-thirds vote is required to override a veto. If you're in favor of having the bill become law, you will press the green button. If you are opposed and wish to sustain the governor's veto, you will press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? House will attend to the state of the vote. 145 voting yea, 175 voting nay. The governor's veto is sustained. The House will attend to a motion to suspend House rules. Recognize the clerk.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Abramson moves that House rules be so far suspended as to permit late drafting, introduction, and consideration at the present time without being drafted by the Office of Legislative Services, required printing, referral to committee, public hearing, and report from committee of a bill relative to limitations on prosecution for first-degree assault, and if said bill passes, to allow immediate third reading.
Chair recognizes Representative Abramson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm asking that the rules be suspended to reintroduce. Oh, I'm sorry. Asking that in this very exceptional circumstance that the rules be suspended for the reintroduction of a bill that this House has passed unanimously 3 times before and the Senate has passed unanimously, that the Senate Judiciary Committee and the House Criminal Justice Committee have passed unanimously. This is House Bill 1067 was just dealing with the problem that we brought up, that if a child is the victim of felony assault, many of the attackers have been getting away.
I remind the member, this is on suspension of the rules, not the bill itself.
Right. Just reminding members of the content of the bill, if that's all right.
Why you need to suspend the rules is what this is about, not the bill itself, the content of the bill, seeing that it doesn't exist.
The reason for the need to suspend the rules is that hundreds of children are injured every month, that children in New Hampshire are killed every year, that this has been an ongoing crisis. I don't think there's any question that the protection of children is something that we have bent the rules in the past for if we needed to when children's safety took precedence. When I ran for office the first time, I told my constituents I would put children's safety first. The reason that I initially introduced the bill was because of a case where someone was putting out cigarettes on a 4-year-old child's arm. And
Okay, once again, I'll remind the member, this is not about the content of the bill. This is why you need to suspend the rules.
Can I ask for a clarification?
Why is it timely or any of that nature, not what's in the content of the bill?
My question is, the urgency is driven by the...
Speak to the members, not to me.
Well, I'm asking for a clarification for how I'm being restricted. The reason for doing this is for protecting the public safety of children, which many members will vote to suspend the rules only for children's safety or only for an immediate emergency. I'm asking for additional discretion.
That's fine, but we don't need to get into about cigarettes and all that kind of stuff, getting into children.
So just the process. The first time the House passed this unanimously, it did go to the Senate, and the Senate, because of the coronavirus, because of the lockdown, that bill and many other members' bills were killed. The second time putting the bill through, it went through the Senate unanimously, but it was vetoed by the governor without a very clear reason, I think. The third time the House passed this bill again unanimously, and sent it over to the Senate, and I was noticed about the hearing only after the hearing had occurred. It was literally hours after the hearing had occurred, and the Senate killed the bill for that reason. I lost my primary on Tuesday, so I won't have the ability to reintroduce the bill, but even if a member were, this issue will continue on. More and more children will be injured, and the deterring effect of the law is lost unless we vote to suspend the rules and allow this essentially one sentence to be reintroduced to the House and go to the Senate and hopefully be signed into law in response to the governor's concerns. So I'm asking members to waive normal traditions and suspend the rules and press the green button.
Chair recognizes Representative Timothy Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Everything we do in this chamber is important. All of the legislation that gets filed is important, at least to somebody. All of the bills that we get from the other chamber are important. And we have a process that we go through to handle all of these important issues that we deal with. We typically, at least in the 10 years I've been here, only make exceptions to that in severe circumstances of imminent emergency, national disasters, and things of that nature. There's some huge flood, we got to clean it up. There's a huge ice storm and the whole state's frozen and the power lines are falling down, we got to do something about it. We get called back by the governor to take action in response to some court decision like what happened a few years ago with the Wayfair thing. We suspend the rules in order to circumvent our normal legislative calendar in order to handle those immediate time-sensitive issues. We only do that very sparingly when there is an immediate time-sensitive issue that cannot be resolved within the normal legislative calendar. I'm sure that the supporters of the underlying legislation here feel that it's extremely important, and I'm sure it is important, because every bill we get, pass or fail, is important legislation, because the work we do here matters. However, it does not rise to the level of a natural disaster, some imminent national catastrophe, a viral pandemic, or something of that nature that simply cannot wait for the regular legislative calendar to take its process next term. I would urge everyone to vote no.
Representative Binford has requested a roll call. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. The motion before us is to suspend the rules. Chair recognizes Representative Timothy Smith for parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, if I know that suspending the rules to circumvent the normal legislative calendar in a situation like this should only be done in response to an unforeseen disaster or emergency, and that nothing that the underlying proposed bill is going to address is unforeseen, would I vote no to reject this motion?
Chair recognizes Representative Amberson for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that this reason, public safety and particularly children's safety, is the very reason that we were sent here, if I know that this very language has passed this House 3 times already unanimously with no voiced opposition from anywhere, and if I know that even the head of the State Patrol, with whom I almost never agree, stated in committee hearings that about half of the murders that he's encountered are preceded by exactly these types of domestic violence attacks that are happening. And finally, Mr. Speaker, if I know that many of these criminals who commit Class A felony assault against young children, some of them under 10 years old, if I know that they have been getting away with this in some cases, including in the case in Seabrook that I mentioned, because the way the statute of limitations is written, would I now press the green button so that we can put this one sentence into law?
The motion before us is suspension of the rules. This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor, you'll press the green button. If you're opposed, you'll press the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. If all members present have an opportunity to vote, House will attend to the state of the vote. 56 voting yea, 257 voting nay. The motion fails. Chair recognizes a member from Auburn, Representative Osborne, for a motion to adjourn from the early session. The question is on the motion to adjourn from the early session.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Resolved that the House now adjourn from the early session, that the business of the late session be in order at the present time.
Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. I ask that members stay in their seats. We have some announcements, and then we have some unanimous consent. So I'm asking members to stay in their seats. Chair recognizes Representative Graham for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is an announcement for the members of Public Works and Highways. Hopefully you remember and have read your calendar that we do have an executive session 10 minutes after the final gavel here in room 201, 203 of the LOB, and we have to exec one bill. If we don't have a quorum, we come back some other day, so please make the effort. And the Vice Chair has arranged for a photographer to take our group picture. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Cloutier for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could I please see the Sullivan County delegation immediately after the session in Section 5 for a brief meeting so that we can review and vote on some minutes from our August 23rd meeting as required by the Department of Revenue Administration. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the clerk for a message.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2 quick announcements. 1, please clean out your seat pockets and mailboxes in the back of the chamber. 2nd announcement, in the State House Visitor Center, there are holiday cards for our Military New Hampshire Challenge. There are several cards where they are going to be sent to troops stationed overseas at the holidays. Please feel free to stop by and sign your name. Thank you.
This is likely the last time the legislature will meet before the new term begins in December. There are many of you who have chosen not to run for re-election, have chosen to seek another office. Or, unfortunately, some of you have been dealt a fate on Tuesday that you were defeated in your primary. Whatever the case may be, we want to thank you for your service to your communities in the state of New Hampshire by serving in this historic body. With those of you not returning next term, please rise so we can thank you for your service. I just want to add that it's been a difficult 2 years for all of us. I hope and pray that next session that we have a much easier time than we have had over the last 2 years. And before we get on to unanimous consent, I'd like to give special recognition to a few members who are not returning that have given 20 years or more to public service in the general court. Our Dean of the House, Laura Panalakis, 44 years. If we had some more bills, Laura, I'd ask you to come up again, but. Betsy McKinney, she's not here, 38 years. David Walsh, 36 years. Norm Major, 26 years. Jackie Cali-Pitts, 26 years. Judith Spang, 24 years. And John Graham, 20 years. "214 years of service between these 7 members, a true testament to public service. For what reason does a member rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd move that the remarks of the Speaker for the last couple of minutes be placed in the permanent journal.
Without objection. Recognize the clerk for Senate message.
Mr. Speaker, I have 2 messages from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, the Senate has voted to sustain the governor's veto on the following bill: Senate Bill 200, apportioning congressional districts. And Mr. Speaker, the Senate has voted to sustain the governor's veto on the following bill, HB 1454, relative to permits for the siting of new landfills.
Chair recognizes, under unanimous consent, Wendy Chase, Representative Wendy Chase.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, my colleagues of the House, for giving me this opportunity to speak. This morning, my father-in-law, Major Robert Freeman Chase, U.S. Army retired, was put to rest alongside of his beloved mother, father, and sister. Today is also the last New Hampshire House session I will be attending as a Stratford County District 18 State Representative. Dad was so proud of my 4 years of the legislative service, and he loved to discuss his concerns about driving, pedestrians, he was 96, pedestrian safety, and always, did I see the governor today? After each day in Concord, I would kneel by his side and tell him about my day. He loved to watch our Judiciary YouTube committee hearings, always sharing his thoughts on how I did and how many times I got up. Bob was born in Lynn, Mass. On July 17, 1926, and at the age of 18, he enlisted in the Army to fight in World War II. After basic training, he served with Company L of the 405th Infantry Regiment, 102nd Infantry Division known as the Ozarks. Bob's baptism of fire came in April of 1945 during their assault over the Rhine River. His unit discovered a war crime in Gardelegen, Germany. When he was being interviewed by Andrew Bigelow for the book, The Rifle, which if anybody has not read that, it's absolutely terrific. All war stories, World War II veterans that are still with us. Dad told him one of the hardest moments for him was seeing the bodies of almost 1,000 civilians pushed into a barn and set on fire by the USS troops. It was unbearable. Each fellow took his turn to go over and see what they could do to help. And he said, I'd seen enough at this point. At the conclusion of the war, Bob spent several months in a rest camp in Germany to recover from his injuries. After the war, Bob remained in service for his country, serving as an officer in the 101th Engineer Division as a combat engineer, and then as an officer in the Air Defense Command, which was responsible for protecting the U.S. mainland from air attacks. He retired from the Army in 1969 as a major. Bob married and raised 4 children in Nahant, Massachusetts, and after the death of his beloved wife, Dorothy, in 1969, he moved the family to Northampton, New Hampshire. He had a very successful business career with several different companies, and in 1980, he founded the New Hampshire Clinic for Hypnosis. Bob always enjoyed spending time with his family and friends. He loved woodworking, restoring antiques, auctions, and collecting toys, especially Hess trucks. Got a lot of them at the house. The number one question each time Dad saw me and we discussed my day in Concord was, but do you really like what you're doing? And my reply was always yes. And he would pat my hand. I miss you, Dad. I miss our conversations. And it was only fitting that I complete my service to the House, my constituents, and to you by honoring your life. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
For what reason did the member rise?
I just moved to put the remarks of my friend from Rollinsford, Permanent Journal.
Without objection, Chair recognizes Representative Baldasaro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for me, it's been a long ride. This is one of the most honorable things I've ever done in my life, next to my time as a Marine. I thank the clerk, Paul Smith, for the great job he's done and support I've had for many years from you, and I hope you'll be up here for the next 16, 20 years for others, making a difference. All right? But anyways, I won't say too much about the Speaker because I've known the Speaker for a long, long time, and I messed with him about riding up here back in the day with a horse and tied up out front. But anyways, when I first came up here, I got elected in November. I came up here, and one of the best chairmen I've ever had, and you all know him, was Chris Roberts. Chris Roberts is no longer here. He's been keen. I learned a lot from that guy. But what a lot of people didn't know that got mad at me in the beginning, called me names, was Chris Roberts and I served in the Marines together. We were in the same unit. We went to Desert Storm together. There was a brotherhood between Chris and I. So those who were on that committee back then when Chris kept coming to me for the answers on veterans issues, it was because the brotherhood that we had serving hand in hand together in war and in the garrison. But anyways, my time up here working with Democrats and Republicans, I made some great friends. When I got married, I had 5 or 6 Democrat representatives at my wedding. Many years complained for many years about me and wanted me to resign. And I can tell you a quick story. One time when somebody wanted me to resign for something I said, I went into Speaker Bill O'Brien's office. There were people sitting at the table. I took my gun off my side. I set it on the table, and I said, I'm here to resign. He said, no, you're not. Go back to work. But anyways, that's another story. When I first came here, we worked hand in hand together, Republicans and Democrats. We were friends. I still got a lot of good friends here. Over the last few years, this has changed drastically. I say good morning. I'm a nice guy. I'm a happy guy. How you doing, everything else. I say hi to some there, and they just walk by. It wasn't like that years ago. Years ago, we went to Tandy's, which was the Capitol Grill. We had a great time over there together. My good friend Mike O'Brien and I are from Cambridge there. A lot don't know why we get along, okay? But he's the Irish side, I'm the Italian side. My good friend Peter Leishman and Margie Smith, we went to Turkey together. Everyone thought I was going to get them killed, okay? Oh, you're going with Al Baldasaro? But in anything, we had a great time, and if anything, I saved them on what to do. And we were being gassed. We were right in the middle of a riot, being gassed. And who was the only van that none of you had gas in your eyes, tears, snots coming out, right? Because they listened to me, all right? This has been one hell of a ride. Every bill, what you don't know, that I filed as a veteran activist, I had Democrats on my bill. I made them nonpartisan. I had as a chairman twice, I had a great committee. I have to thank my good ranking member, Linda Massimella, who we became very good friends for a long time, okay? And we worked hand in hand. Everyone in my committee, I've given them opportunity, and I told them just like I did, the Democrat Party and the Republican Party did not send us here. Your constituents did. You vote by your heart. And if you believe in something, you stand by it. And I told them all, on both parties, that in my committee. That's why we had such a great time working hand in hand together. I hope, and I've been in this business for many years, so you don't know I was a Democrat for many years. Okay, my grandfather was a 4-term mayor. I grew up sitting at the table with the Kennedys and grew up with Tip O'Neill. Okay, my grandfather was Al Vellucci, 50 years politics. But what I'm trying to say is back then we might disagree, but we worked hand in hand together. 80% of the legislation in this house, we all come together. But yet some attack each other personally, or they want to throw stones at you and call you everything in the book. And that's me. I've been called everything in the book. Okay, I've been attacked over and over and over, and for no reason, because you really didn't know me, because you looked at me and said, wow, he's an ass. Okay, but really, I'm an old Marine, and Marine Corps mentality, take the hill. But make sure you teach the team, everyone else, so they survive. And that's what we did up here. We came together in many, many issues. And I'm hoping in the future we come back together the way it was. Okay? I got to admit, my good friend over here, the former speaker, and yes, we're friends. We're also brethren together. We're also fellow veterans. He did a great job. We worked hand in hand. If you notice, many times when I was the floor leader, I got up because I recognized his voice being weak. He was in the Army, so I understand, And I got up and I brought him halls to help him out with his voice. Am I right? All right. And the speaker here, the same thing. We've been together a long time. The speaker has done a great job. He's treated Republicans and Democrats. He did everything he can to bring us together. But because of COVID, caused us all problems. We were separated. We weren't doing like we used to do over the years there. So we really didn't get to know each other. Okay, we have some representatives here who are always in attack mode. Always in attack mode. If a Republican looked the wrong way, he was an idiot. He was attacked. If a Democrat looked the wrong way, she was attacked. or he was attacked. There was people sitting in his house twittering on every word we said, twittering out. And it's a shame. That's got to stop. That's got to stop. We got to work hand in hand. We all have families. We're all volunteers. My family, my kids used to say, Dad, why do you do this? They attack you all the time. Why? And I told them I do it for love of country, love of state, love of elderly people that I've worked hand in hand with. My good friend Catherine Rogers, God bless her. Her and I worked hand in hand on an elderly protection bill. My good Remy Cushion, we worked hand in hand on another bill. This is the way it should be. You know, but for many years I was called names and this and that and that, but you really didn't know. It was your stupidity, your ignorance that did that. That's all it was. But I'm asking you to please, once and for all, bring this house back together the way it was. And that way there, we will prosper. And I'm going to be watching from afar, okay, as I work on my tan there. And as, you know, and I'm hoping my good friend John Burt don't make any remarks, because what you all don't know, you attack John Burt, but I have 5% African blood in me. Did you know that? Okay, so when you called me a racist over the years, my family is African American, okay, but I'm a racist. You see what I'm saying? So think before you attack somebody, okay, because you're wrong, okay? We're all a family trying to do the right thing. We're just coming from different directions. Thank you.
For what reason does the member rise?
Mr. Speaker, I would like to move that the remarks of the previous speaker be put in the permanent journal.
Without objection. Chair recognizes the clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee on Enrolled Bills has examined and found correctly enrolled the following entitled House Bill 2023, making appropriations to the Department of Energy for a state emergency fuel assistance program and a supplemental electric benefit, and relative to the electric low-income program fund, signed by the committee members Kevin A. Hart and Jason Osborne.
Chair recognizes Representative Cali-Pitts.
Thank you for those who endured. I don't say much all the time, and if I do, I'll cry. All I can say is thank you to everyone who has been kind and brought me along over 26 years. I was going to stay one term. To the clerks, to the maintenance people, to the security people, to everybody else behind us, to the committee assistants who really had the knowledge and you could run to and say, help me. And to my family, to Burt, I'm going to miss the hot dogs. Thank you. Thank you so much. We are a family. We are sometimes dysfunctional, and like a family, we argue. I can't remember when I first came in here. I'm brash because I was a Marine wife, not Al's. And I came from New York City, and if you're quiet in New York City, you'll get lost under a subway. So, thank you again. That's all I want to say, and it has been a great ride over 26 years. Thank you all.
What reason does the member rise?
I move that the remarks.
Without objection. Chair recognizes Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After hearing all the folks that have served for so long, I hope you will also see I speak of a patriot who has been with us for 4 years, but we have an opportunity to help the work she will be doing. Because my colleague from the other side of Loudon Road made history. She's also one of the most patriotic people I know. And I wanted to share this good news about the work she'll be doing. When she was elected after a heated and sometimes ugly campaign, her victory made it into the New York Times and all kinds of media and overseas. It made international news. And all the way across the globe to her native country of Afghanistan, where she and her family had to flee because her father, a patriot to the United States, served and assisted our military. He was an interpreter. They became targeted by the enemies, and after stays in multiple refugee camps, her family made it to Concord. She graduated from Concord High School, got married, graduated from NHTI, a mother of 3, and I don't even think you're 30 yet. I'm editing a few things here, sorry. She still would like to be with us, but what she's doing instead, just makes sense that she'd be the person to do this. And what inspired me were the speeches that a few folks, and especially my colleague from Londonderry, as the daughter of a Marine Semper Fidelis, you spoke eloquently about Afghanistan and how our withdrawal from Afghanistan was botched. And what is difficult is that there wasn't a plan necessarily to help those families and those patriots who helped our country, but now more and more of them are being are leaving Afghanistan. And my colleague, our colleague, Sophia Wazir, will be working, or is working, for Espitia, resettling new Americans here in New Hampshire, mainly right now in Concord and Manchester. And I said, I would like to recognize this. What do you need? Because just like our ancestors, mine from Germany and Scotland, etc., didn't have a lot when they got here, fleeing a country. She said, well, the number one thing they need is housing. Well, obviously the housing is a big issue here. So if anyone has any connection to fair housing, or assisting connections with landlords, that sort of thing, obviously, accessory dwelling units, or any thoughts if you're a member of a church or a temple or other congregation that would like to help, that's their number one need. I mean, some have been here for 6 or more months and they have no home yet. They also need volunteers, people to help teach English, and for another colleague from Loudoun, they need people to help teach the citizenship test as they are on the path to citizenship. A test most of us couldn't pass, by the way. And they also need donations. So I just wanted you to know that we talk about people who serve our country. We obviously, as legislators, serve our state. Many of you served our country. Many of you related to people who served our country. But don't forget that our new Americans include people like Sophia and her family who fled countries where because they assisted our country, they now are new Americans. And I hope that if you have the opportunity to be helpful, that you will find a way to be helpful. And that's not as much as a recognition, but a thank you for the work that you're going to be doing, and we will help in any way we can. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Espitia.
Yeah, our remarks prepared for this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, thank you all for allowing me the time to speak this afternoon. I know we're all trying to get out of here, so I'll try to be quick. And I, like some of y'all, am not seeking re-election this year. So first, I want to thank you for supporting me throughout my time in the legislature. And our work here at the State House is not easy often, but it's so important. And with colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I learned how to be a better public servant and member of our community. And thank you for those who taught me the history of the legislature, those who took time to discuss policy, and those who guided me through the process of filing a bill to its signage. Honestly, thank you all. But today not only marks my last day standing here before you as a member of this honorable body, but it also marks the beginning of Hispanic Heritage Month, which ends on October 15th. And I'm sure that some of you are like, why is it starting in the middle of a month? And it's because when it was created in 1968 by President Lyndon B. Johnson, it coincided with 8 Latin American countries' Independence Day, including my parents' homeland of Mexico being tomorrow. But for many of our global neighbors, this is a time of celebration, and for all of us, this is a time to learn and celebrate the rich history of Latin American countries and those Latinos who live here in the Granite State. We can celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month by supporting our local Hispanic and Latino businesses, trying out new places to eat and shop while, supporting these small businesses. You can attend events in person or online. You can visit HispanicHeritageMonth.gov for resources and events. And this month reminds me of the importance of representation. People who look like me in leadership at all levels of government. Earlier this year, I met a group of 4th graders. They were touring the State House. They were out here and from my district. And many of those students speak Spanish at home. They're bilingual. About 50% of the kids who attend the local elementary school are from Hispanic backgrounds. And the look of surprise when I greeted them in Spanish, they were like, "Yo, that's wild." They were like, "Oh, like my mom is also either Mexican, Colombian, Ecuadorian, which I will say, the Hispanic community here in New Hampshire is just incredibly diverse from all parts of Latin America. So, and then, once we get those thank you letters from the 4th graders, so many of them were showering me. They were like, "Yo, that's so cool that you're also like me." So, for us, it uplifts them. It tells them that they too can do this one day. So, although we celebrate, we can celebrate year-round. This month, I encourage all of you to pause and reflect on what this means in the Granite State. And so thank you for allowing me the time to speak, and thank you for this fantastic experience here in the New Hampshire State House. And hopefully maybe one day I'll come back, but I just appreciate all of y'all. Thank you.
For what reason does a member rise?
Mr. Speaker, I rise up to speak about Representative Espitia just said from September 15 to October 15 we celebrate.
You weren't recognized on the sheet for unanimous consent. You weren't on the list, Representative. Without objection, you can move forward, but...
Okay. Thank you. I will sign it. So I would like to say that I wanted to continue the conversation that Representative Espitia started. From September 15 to October 15, we celebrate everything that our culture brings to the state. Everything that we represent. We bring music, we bring food, and we bring joy. I'm honored to be the first Salvadorian state representative here, representing the Hillsborough County 43, Milford. Now, I'm going to be very quickly, and I'm going to say in Spanish. Es un honor para mí ser la representante del distrito número 42. Soy la primera representante salvadoreña que ha sido elegida en este estado. Para mí es un honor celebrar nuestra cultura, celebrar todo lo que nosotros como cultura brindamos a este estado. Brindamos música, brindamos comida, brindamos alegría, todo lo que nuestra cultura representa. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to celebrate my culture. Today is Independence Day in my country, El Salvador, and tomorrow is a state representative, Espitia's culture, Mexico Independence Day. So thank you so much for giving me the honor to be a representative for these 2 years. It's been my honor.
We're down to the last person that requested unanimous consent, Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's a couple reps that are no longer with us that I just want to say their names. Representative Shaw and Representative Valancourt. They taught me a lot up here. Representative Valancourt said, be friends with everybody, because who you're beating up today, you're going to be best friends tomorrow on a different bill. And I agree with that. Right there is example. You know, we've had differences, but then there's been bills that we've joined. And that's the way it should be. The other people that have really helped me is Representative Nodder, Baldasaro, Representative Cali-Pitts, and Representative Eaton. They all showed me that we can get along and that we must get along in order to, make good legislation happen for the people. I want to thank Clerk Paul Smith for everything he does for us. His staff and the clerk, they work extremely hard, especially the late nights we're here, and you never see him complain. Mr. Speaker, I am very honored to be here. I promised the voters that I would be here for every vote. I've been here 12 years and I've never missed a vote yet. And Mr. Speaker, there was times I was nervous about you not hearing me holler roll call. But you always
I always heard you, John.
But you always did. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the voters of Goffstown, Ware, and Deeren who allowed me to sit in their seat. It's not my seat, it's their seat. They allowed me to be here for 12 years. I want to thank them for that. I really do thank them for that. And Mr. Speaker, my wife said I couldn't get up here and speak because, she says I'm emotional most of the time. But I do want to thank my wife, Phyllis Burt. I am so blessed to have her for a wife. I know there's a God because she is a gift from Him to me. And Mr. Speaker, if it wasn't for my wife, we wouldn't have raised $43,000 for Hot Dog Day to 10 different dog groups. It's pretty incredible how we can all come together and go outside for a hot dog. So, Mr. Speaker, I am not returning, and it's sad that for me, it's a lot of emotions. It's hard for me to say goodbye. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank all of my friends here, and I want to say God bless you, and I will miss it being here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what reason does the member rise?
Well, he's my brother, so I move that his remarks be...
Without objection. Representative Osborne moves that the House stand in recess for the purpose of receiving messages, enrolled bill amendments, and enrolled bill reports, after which business is concluded. The House shall stand adjourned from the 2022 session. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted.